Hi everyone, it's Desiree, and I'm here with another color pencil tutorial. So this is going to be a long video. I am going to show all of the coloring. When it comes to the coloring of this image, I will speed it up, but I will still be talking through it, so I get gabby. So just to let you know, long video, gabbiness, keep that in mind. So the stamp that I'm using, it's a rubber stamp, and I already have it positioned in my MISTI right now. It's by IndigoBlu, and it's called Vintage Rose, and I'm absolutely in love with the sentiment, and it says, "Kindness is given so softly, so gently, falling like tiny seeds along our path and brightening it with flowers." So you kind of get this double thing. But what I love about this stamp set, and what I think would be a way to help with those that feel they struggle with colored pencil, is this gives a lot of locations of shading because of all of the cross-hatching lines that are in this photo. So I'm going to show you how you can use this photo to help with your shading areas and everything else. Now, normally I do not worry about light source. I'm always having my light source come in from the right to the left in some way. If at one point I have it coming in from the left to the right, I'm good with it. I'm just saying. But this does already have light source. It has a shading in the background. So we're going to use that to our advantage. I am going to use my Prismacolors, those colored pencils. I am going to utilize those. The ink that I'm going to use is going to be the Simon Says Stamp Fog. You could use usually when it comes to colored pencils, I will use my Ink on 3 Fade Out. I love that Fade Out ink. I think it works absolutely phenomenal. But I do want the lines and the shading to stay, because we're going to use that in our favor. We're going to incorporate that, but I don't want it to be prominent. So I don't want to use a black. I don't want to use a gray. I want to use a very pale gray. And the Simon Says Stamp Fog is great. I use this and also their Barely Beige a lot before I got hooked on to Ink on 3 Fade Out. Okay, so the paper that I'm going to use, you've all seen it before, sorry I had to turn around and grab some, is my Mixed Media by Strathmore. It is, I get the 6 by 8 inch pack. There's 15 sheets, and I cut it in half, so 4 by 6. So I get 2 panels per image. This one's toned gray. It comes in toned blue, toned tan. But what I love about this, now there's also pads that are just for the colored pencils. What is frustrating with that is the thinness of it. It's very thin. This is very thick. I don't know if you can hear that. But this is like cardstock. This is like 120-pound cardstock weight. And the weight of this is actually 184 pounds, 300 G/M. I don't know, grams per milligram. Okay. So I am going to be using the toned gray. I haven't decided what color flower I'm going to make yet. I think I'm going to do a pink. I think I'm going to do a pink rose today. So I have it set up here already in my stamp positioning tool. This piece here of the toned gray is cut to be 4 by 5.5, and you can just see how large this image is. It's going to be absolutely beautiful. Now I'm going to stamp it a couple times. I truly am a fan of red rubber stamps. The image that you get from your stamps is absolutely amazing. Now, don't worry, it looks like a hot mess. It's okay. We just got to stamp it a couple more times and we'll be good. And I'm actually going to put the pressure right here. And that's exactly what I want it to look like. I'm okay with that shadow in the background to be off. Okay, so I'm going to take my cardstock out. I'm going to set that aside, although that looks absolutely beautiful like that. And then I'm going to grab another piece. And this is for the sentiment. So the sentiment's really long. It's really, really cool, actually. So I'm just going to stamp that onto the bottom. And I'm going to use my Gina K slate for that. Slide that up. And that is perfect. I don't need it to be perfect or anything else because it is a typed image. And I do love the type image. Just going to wipe that down and put that there as well. Put this back together. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to real quick, I'll be right back. I'm going to grab my pencils, grab the colors that I'm going to choose for this, and then I'm going to keep my piece, my photo very close by because there are some areas that are merging together, which is fine. So I'm going to have this here. I will zoom in. Just give me a couple minutes and then I'm going to switch over. When we do come back, I'm going to be in a voiceover mode and it's going to be sped up. Okay, so I'll be right back. Okay, I fibbed. We're not on a voiceover mode. So I wanted to show, these are the colors here that I've chosen. These here are going to be for the leaves, and this here is going to be for the rose. This is what those colors look like on the paper that I'm using. All right, I will have a color card that will be on my blog that you'll be able to see this. And again, I'm using my Prismacolors, and I am going to have this here first. I'm going to start on the leaves because I know that right here is where one of the stems sits. Here's another stem. It shows better on the photo than what it is in this picture that we stamped. All right, so I just need to make sure. Now, what I'm also going to do is when I zoom in, I'm going to have an X put down on my table here just to make sure that I stay within that area because I never do. Just saying. And I'm going to make sure I have my sharpeners down in case I have to sharpen. And then we will take it from there. Okay, so now we will be switching over to a voiceover mode. Okay, so here we are, truly in the voiceover mode. So here I'm going to be, all of the coloring is going to be shown except the largest leaf up by the rose. Yeah, forgot to hit record again, so my bad. But all of the other coloring will be shown. So this one is a little bit different. You can see how this stamped, and again, I used an ink. I didn't use a fade out ink because I actually wanted the shadow where this looks like it was double stamped. I actually wanted that shadow to be the gray and to be a very pale gray. It's like that I've shown in my other videos where I bring in a soft shade of a gray or a blue or even a brown, and I go around my entire image to let that come up off of the page, make it look like it's 3D. So I'm letting the stamp do that. You can see I'm working a little differently to the point where I'm putting a lot more layers down. I'm using more colors. But because of the shading from this stamp, it's showing me where the shades need to go, which helps when looking at how to put your shade ins, how to make something look like it's folded, how to make something look like it's bent back. There are ways to create those movements in your piece. So when it comes to the leaves, I'm taking my lightest color and I'm just outlining each of the leaves so I knew where they were. Because again, this will start drying back and then I could lose what those images are. Also for the leaves, I'm going to work on each one individually. And for some, and everything's going to be a little bit differently. You can see now I'm coming in with this indigo blue. I want that stem to stand out. So I'm kind of giving it more of a blue outline, a blue tone, and I'm trying to fade that out with then the darker green and then also the mid-tone green just to blend that out. My leaves aren't going to have so much blue in them. They're going to have more of the deepest green, which of course is deep or dark green. So, but that's how I'm going to differentiate between them. I want this piece because of the hatching that you're seeing, okay, those lines that show in the photo what this image should look like shaded. I wanted to resemble that in my coloring a little bit. So you can see I finally pulled the picture in so that you could see I'm looking at that, and you can actually see I'm following that guide to tell me where the lines, the direction the lines are going, and which way or how my darkest colors should be and where they should be sitting. So I'm using that photo, and we can definitely do that. There's a lot of photos when it comes to our stamps that either show us the shadows or they show us what it would look like in color. I know Art Impressions is one. IndigoBlu is another one. Just to name a couple. They're the ones that are just on the top of my head. But there are others out there that absolutely do that. And that will help. That will help as long as when you keep practicing to make that better. To get stronger in that. You can see as I'm following that, I'm actually, sometimes I'm coloring in the whole leaf first, sometimes I'm not. I'm putting in those darkest colors first. I'm going right into it. Then I'm coming in, I'm extending that out with my medium tone just to pull them in. And what those are doing is it's making it look like the leaves are bent, that they're folded back, or they have dimension to it. When I'm leaving the screen, I'm sharpening my pencils. Now, I was having a problem, and this happens with colored pencils. Prismacolor is not the only one that it breaks, but I do like a handheld sharpener, like we used to have when we were, well, at least me, when I was in elementary school. You know, just those simple metal ones. Now, because the way that it's being held, you yourself could break the leads in the sharpener itself. There are mechanical ones that I'll use, but to me they're wasteful, but there's just some times that you need to use that. So I'll have those linked down below. You can see as I worked on that last leaf, just before this leaf here that I'm working, the lines are going the completely wrong way. For some reason, I did not follow the way the lines went, and I went completely straight up and down or in one direction across the entire leaf, instead of creating the V that you should be creating as you're coming up a leaf. That's not a problem. We will work through that and we will cover it up. We do not start over. We continue through and we don't give up. There are always ways to adjust, correct, and absolutely cover up when it comes to those errors. Again, this is a handmade card. And every card I get, I know you guys have heard me say it before if you've watched my videos before, every piece of card or journal or ephemera, whatever it is you're making, it's art. You're taking from nothing and creating something. It's art. Doesn't matter if you're casing. It doesn't matter what it is. Each one will be unique. But we don't give up. We don't say, okay, that leaf, because you can tell that leaf is just throwing everything off. I don't have the same highlights going on. I don't have the same feel within that leaf that I have in the others. You can definitely see it. I can see it more on the video now than when I'm looking at it live. So, but you can see it, and it is throwing that off. It's okay. We are going to correct that. So with the shades of the pink that I've chosen, I had to play around with that. So I started with my first leaf, and you can see the image. You can see where those highlights are. You can see where those shadows are. You can see some of the petals to the back are even darker than those to the front. That's why I do have so many layers of pinks that I've chosen when it comes to this. So every time I put a layer down of my color, it may look like I'm putting a lot down. I am not using a lot of pressure. I am using light pressure. I am going back and forth to make sure that I have a layer down, but I want to make sure I don't fill in the tooth of the paper, because once I do that, then my Prismacolors or wax pencils, then I'm going to get that the true bloom. And what that bloom is, it's where it glazes over. It looks like there's a glaze on it, and that's the wax. I mean, there are times as I'm looking at my card now and I'm tilting it in the sun, and there's only certain areas where I have that bloom, and you want to avoid that. You don't want that shiny sheen. Now, some people may, and that's fine. That is your choice. I do like the matte look from the pencils. So you can see I am really on this petal for a long time, because I determined my darkest color to the back, that back petal. That kind of set the stage. Instead of using white as the highlight, I'm using the lightest pink, and that lightest pink is called Deco Pink. So that's actually being used as my highlight. You can see I'm still following that photo to give me where the darkest colors should be, to give me where the highlights should be seen. And you can see I will go back to that front petal, again, the one that I started with, because it doesn't have enough of a shadow put into it. It's too pale, as everything else is surrounding it. So you'll see me, I'll go back to some of these petals, because I want it to have a balance. But I do want that front one to be the lightest of them all, because that's the one that's getting that direct sun. To make something as if you've got this one edge here that I'm working on now, that is completely turned out. So it's turning out on itself. So by putting down your lightest color and then putting your next layers just in the center, let the outer edges be the highlight. That creates a curve. And it creates a curve away from the rose. See, I'm just going to continue through, and as I get more and more to the center, I am outlining first so that I can see what this section is. And again, I am very much relying on that photo from the stamp to just help me guide what this looks like and how this goes. Depending upon the way I put these hatch marks, or the way that I'm putting my colors in, will determine how that petal will look. So you want to be cautious of that. Usually when I'm doing a flower, I am doing those lines. I'm doing those flecks, that flecking motion to get those lines in, and then I'm blending them out. That's how I do. Now you can see I'm going right back into that petal. That petal was too bright. Everything else was a little bit darker. So now I'm just toning her down. And now I'm looking at my highlights to get those in. And using the pink, which has a little bit of peach in it, which kind of gives this a different look, and a look of what I am actually looking for that rose, or for this rose that I'm actually coloring. So as I continue to get further and further into the center, more and more I need to do some outlining, because there's a lot of highlights that they put on the top of this rose because it's starting to curl. The edge of those petals are curling, and you want those to be the lightest out of everything that you have. So if you've ever looked at a rose, you get this bud first that's totally encased on itself, and then as it continues to age, it just gets more open and open and open, and these petals just start untwining themselves out. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's beautiful the way that happens. When it develops, as it continues to age. So you can see I just put a little bit, a light line. I'm using like one of the mid-tones, one of the darker tones, so that it's easier for me to add that highlight to this rose. So we're just going to continue to watch this develop, because we are coming to the end. And shortly, we will be back to me speaking. We're not going to do a voiceover. I just like to do that while I'm coloring. But I do have to speed it up because of the length of time. So we'll be right back. Okay, so that was a lot of coloring. But one of the things that, again, like I said before, when it comes to this image, there's already a lot of shading. Whether you get the exact impression on your paper, depending upon the ink that you use, or you have this photo, so you know exactly where the darkest lines should be sitting on your piece. So if I just set this side by side, you can see this is what I was looking at. You can see how I have the lighter shades and the darker shades, and how all of these lines are moving. Now this leaf here is off, and I'm going to tell you why. Of course I would. Because of the way that I put the lines. These lines are going this way. They should be going this way. All right, so that's what's throwing that leaf off. The lines, the direction of the lines, they should be coming from the center vein and going up this way. And instead they're all going this way on both sides of that vein, which is throwing it off. Now, I can see that. Am I worried about it? Absolutely not. I am not worried about it. And how are we going to fix it? With our sentiment. Because this is nothing you do would you ever, if there is a mistake, you keep going. If you've watched my videos before, I have always said that. You keep going. We don't throw it out. Paper has two sides. We have ways to cover things up, and that's what we're going to do with this. That is not a reason to throw this card away. This took, when I sped that up, I am going to be speeding up anywhere from 4 to 5 to 6 times. It took me about an hour and a half totally to color this image. we don't start over. We continue. Okay, so that is something that I do like about these. And use the packaging. It will show you whether they color it or whether they're just doing this cross hatching. They'll show you where your shadows should be. And then you'll eventually just get a feel for it, which is wonderful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my liquid adhesive and I'm going to create my layers. So I grabbed some of my my Recollections cardstock. I love this cardstock. I usually buy the packs with the 5 colors in it, and I love to use these for my mats. It's just something that I do. You get beautiful mats. I can keep layering on them, whether I use 3 layers, 5 layers, 7 layers. I'm adding dimension, but I am not adding a super amount of bulk. So I did choose a yellow green and a very pale pink for my mats, which will give that card the stability. I used the light pink to pull out the highlight, and then I use this green here to pull out the highlights in the green as well. Now this, remember, this mat here is 4 by 5 1/4. The pink mat is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and the green mat is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I'm now going to put this onto my standard A2 size card base. This will become and remain a top folding card, even though I'm going to put my sentiment on in a different way. What I also love, if you've watched my other colored pencils tutorials, I always take a light gray or blue and I go around the image. Because of the ink that we stamped with, I don't have to do that. There's naturally a shadow from that stamp because, again, the highlight's coming this way. That shadow is all down in here. Let's see if I can, I don't know if you can see that right in there. And that's about as light as it's going to go. Okay? So here is our sentiment. I stamped it on the same paper I colored on, and I used my decal edged scissors, and absolutely my vintage photo is going to come in. And the reason why I'm using my vintage photo is to frame this sentiment. Now I could have grabbed like a mat and created another mat, but I didn't want to add too much width to this sentiment. I just wanted to frame it. And by doing that, now it sticks up. It comes off the page, whether I keep that like this or whether I'm going to use my foam squares. And I do want to use my foam squares. And I'm just going to place those down. We're going to remove the release paper. I am going to turn this sideways, and I'm going to put that right there. So I am slightly covering that leaf and part of the rose, and I'm okay with that. But the card will sit this way. And there's our sentiment. So just by putting that little bit of vintage photo and pushing it up, adding that dimension, it now stands on its own, even though it's the same color. So that is our card. I'm not going to add any embellishments or anything like that. I think the sentiment itself is acting as if it's an embellishment. I do hope that you enjoyed this. I hope I gave you some tips and tricks. If you keep watching the colored pencils that I have, it all depends on the image as to how I color it. 9 out of 10 though, I use it like a Copic. I put my light color down first, I then go to my mid-tone, I then go to my dark tone. I may have that fourth crazy dark, as someone always says in the Copic world, crazy dark. I'll come in with that, and then I go back to the dark, back to the medium, back to the light to blend those before I come in with my blender if necessary. So I hope I gave you some ideas. This was just a little bit differently. A stamp like this may make you more comfortable and help you to get used to colored pencils if that's a medium that you're very interested in. If you, yes, hello, hi. If you should have any questions, make sure you leave them down below and I will get back to you as soon as I can. All the products that I used here will be linked down below as well. If you wanted to just check them out. If you're on your computer, just click on Show More to expand out the video description. If you're on a mobile device, click on the arrow that's pointing down or the triangle that's pointing down on the right-hand side to expand that same section. If you'd like, please subscribe. I'd love to have you here as part of my group, and I truly am grateful for those of you that have already subscribed, and I'm also grateful for those of you that stuck around to watch this lengthy video. And again, I hope I gave you some inspiration and showed you maybe something, an easier way to complete. I hope everyone is enjoying their day. Continue to stay safe and healthy, but remember what's most important to me each and every day, along with being safety. Wow, being safe. And it probably helps you, and I should probably start doing it myself. Always be creative, everyone. Till next time.